And hello, everyone, and welcome to College Football Wraparound. I'm Cooper Naylor. So glad you could join us. And as you can see behind me, we've got a new setup here for the studio. Got me a cabinet behind me, and then got some stuff put behind. So, just had some changes that I've done to the studio. So, of course, comment below what you think about it. Had an opportunity to add in some new stuff, change up the set a little bit. And so I think it looks really cool. Able to showcase my bow, got some of my awards from 4-H and various other things. Of course, got my Phil Steele magazine up there. So, of course, very fun to be able to showcase all my stuff that I like to have. So, tonight we've got a busy show. Of course, I'm going to start out talking about something that has been a big story for the last week. It's the Michigan sign stealing scandal. I'm going to get into that. I'm going to talk about my rankings. Talked about that last night. So if you didn't catch that, the rankings, I'm here to break it down for you. We're going to chat about Utah and USC. We're going to talk about Tennessee and Alabama. We're going to talk about Penn State, Ohio State. We're going to talk about Virginia, North Carolina. And then right in the middle, we have our question and answers time. And then, of course, I'm going to announce our next game coming up Saturday. So, busy show. So, to begin tonight, I want to start out by talking about this Michigan sign stealing scam. So, now, I want to start off and make sure y'all don't misquote me on anything. I want to be completely honest with y'all. Everybody does this. I remember a few years ago, the big scandal was the Houston Astros in the MLB. They were stealing signs. Has that stopped them from winning? Look, everybody steals signs, whether it be the MLB, college football. I mean, go look at the NFL. What did they do to the Patriots when they had this stuff? So, I mean, it's not fair to call one team out and not say everybody does it. So, I mean, it's crazy what's going on right now in the world of college football. But I've got an article from CBS Sports. This will give you some information. So I want to start about, let's see. So right here it says, the number 2 Michigan Wolverines are in the midst of a dream season, though it's come with major distractions. The on-field product has been undeniably impressive, but sign-stealing accusations have created an off-field soap opera that seems to end with a new cliffhanger daily. All the while, the Wolverines remain firmly in the hunt for a third consecutive Big Ten championship and college football playoff berth. So at the heart of the investigation is staffer Connor Stalions, who allegedly bought tickets for more than 30 games, many of them Big Ten, and used illegal technology to steal signs. Stalions has been suspended with pay pending the outcome of the NCAA's investigation. Coach Jim Harbaugh, who has been entangled with the NCAA, is an obvious focal point here as well, but he has denied knowledge of the operation. So that's the beginning of the article. Of course, all you got to do is go to Google and search Michigan sign stealing scandal. You can find this article from CBS Sports. That's kind of like the premise at what is going on. So, again, if I'm being completely honest with you, it's bad. This is bad stuff. But it doesn't make sense to me, like I said, how you're going to get mad at one team. And isn't it pretty funny how Jim Harbaugh, at the beginning of the season this year, suspended the first 3 games. Of course, that stuff went on. And he's come back. They're 8-0 right now. Isn't it funny, though, how now this is coming out? I mean, if there was an attempt by people in the NCAA to try and force Jim Harbaugh to go back to the NFL, this just seems too obvious. And I don't understand what the deal is and why it's Michigan getting called out for this stuff. But yes, a lot of people in the media has been saying, oh, well, if they did it and if it comes out true, then they cheated. Yeah, they cheated, but so does every team. Here's the thing. Michigan got caught, going a little over the top from what it seems like. Other teams try to cover it up as best as they can, but they all do it. So, do I think that this guy will probably get fired, Connor Stallions? He'll probably get fired. But it shouldn't come without really thinking to ourselves, we've got other teams in the NCAA that do this. Pretty much every team. So, and I mean, that comes with a moment where we got to find a solution to this. And there's a bunch of other things in college football as well. But this is something that that the NCAA, and really the NCAA's failed. Let's be honest. So if the NCAA has failed, and it's not just through the sign stealing scandals and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you can bring up other situations, the Tez Walker stuff in North Carolina. He gets to play halfway through the season. You're talking about probably some of their biggest games he didn't get to play for. And then the NCAA, after like 6 games, says, oh, he can play now. Okay. Another example of why the NCAA is failing. Look at the refs. Iowa and Minnesota the other day. The guy did not call a fair catch. So this player does not call fair catch, catches the ball after it hits the ground and rolls a little bit from a punt. He returns it for a touchdown. It is taken back because apparently one of the refs said that he called for fair catch. Although video evidence shows there was no fair catch. So if there's no fair catch and you got video evidence, I don't care that a ref said, oh, well, I already called it. Video evidence shows he didn't call fair catch. You got to overturn that, and so you got to stick with the original call on the field, which is touchdown. So, all in this to say that, and I think there's been a bunch of people who's been saying this, but the NCAA has got to step out of the way of college football, and college football's got to find some way to control itself. And if it comes where the college football playoff is going to be the predominant heading of college college football, that's what they got to do. Because the NCAA has failed, and they continue to fail. So that's a lot of what I got to say about the NCAA. And if you're gonna investigate Michigan, you better go ahead and go investigate every single other team in this sport. Or either you start coming up with a solution where they don't have to call out the signs, where there's a possibility of them being stolen. Why don't you do like the NFL? Have the coach talk through a headset to the quarterback who's got a headset inside of his helmet. Why not? So that's all I got. That's just my frustration aspect that I wanted to go ahead and let y'all have so that I can get that out of the way early. So now, my rankings. So let me go ahead and show you the top 13. So we start out, Ohio State has moved back to number 1. And we'll get into Ohio State, Penn State here in just a little while. Oklahoma survived at home against UCF. They go to basically Ohio State and Oklahoma. I have them switch because, with the way Ohio State played against Penn State and the way Oklahoma played against UCF, I just had to swap them. I still think the 4 teams I got right here, right now, if the playoffs started today, this is the best 4 teams in the country, in my opinion. So, of course, Georgia, they were on bye week. They just sat there. Michigan, of course, they're going on bye week this week. They had the blowout of Michigan State, which was never fair in the first place. Florida State, Texas, Washington, Alabama, Oregon, Ole Miss, Penn State, Oregon State, North Carolina. So that's the top 13. Of course, Penn State lost on the road at Ohio State. North Carolina, we're going to get into them, but good grief. They always seem to have this loss each and every year, but they lost at home to Virginia. Yeah, so not a good week if you're North Carolina. And then you look at 14 through 25, Louisville, Utah, Tulane, UCLA, James Madison, Notre Dame, Florida. Florida's back. Tennessee, Duke, LSU, Missouri, USC. So, that is my rankings. Now, if we go back to the top 13, the one that, if you look at Texas and Washington, barely survived. Texas, of course, went on the road to Houston. Washington, I believe, hosted Arizona, or it may have been Arizona State. Either one of them survived that game. Alabama, of course, was down 20-7 at halftime. Came back 34-20 to beat Tennessee. Impressive by Alabama. Oregon, of course, they moved up. Ole Miss moved up. Penn State dropped from 6 to 11. Oregon State, and then North Carolina dropped 4 places from 9 to 13. Of course, very interesting here with the 14 through 25. Really, I think it's the 10 to 25 range where it's harder to figure out where to put teams. So it's very interesting indeed about all this. The one that's very interesting, LSU, I really haven't moved them very high yet. It's because when you look at who they played, I don't know if they've really had that big win yet. Of course, they're on bye week this week, and then they've got Alabama. So here's my thing. And if they beat Alabama, they will move pretty high, I think. But still, I think they're quite behind right now. They're a good team, but I haven't seen enough of LSU to really tell me, they should be top 10. They're 6-2 right now. So, we're going to wait and see what happens. All right. So now it is time for me to talk about Utah and USC. And I've got some stats pulled up here on my other computer. So we're going to get into some team stats. But, this game, and how do I explain this? I thought Utah had the momentum from the kickoff until most of the way. I think they had the momentum, and of course, there's a little bit of urgency. I think when it came to being down 32-31, you got to drive. But see, there wasn't a lot because if you're Utah, you came into this game knowing USC's defense is crap. Let's all be honest. USC cannot play defense at all. They're terrible. And that's primarily why I think they're 6-2. Because they don't have a defense. And this is why they lose to teams like Utah over and over and over, is because when you got a Utah team who just basically, they want to play hard football. I think, although they gave up 32 points, I mean, you're playing Caleb Williams, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. When you got that going for you, yeah, I mean, giving up 32 and still winning the game, I feel like you giving up just 32, I think, is pretty impressive if you're playing a USC team. Utah also, I feel like they just had the momentum all the way. And I just feel like Utah definitely showed they were the better team. So, getting into the stats of this game, when you look at the first downs, Utah won that 23-18. Third down efficiency, Utah was 3 of 13. USC was 4 of 11. Fourth down efficiency, Utah 2 of 3. USC never went for it. Okay, total yards. Utah 482 to 401 of USC. So they had 81 more yards total. Passing game, USC 256, Utah 235. When you look at the run game, Utah 247 and USC 145. So if you look at this, Utah definitely was the more balanced team in this game. Well, at least they were able to be more balanced in this game. And like I said, because USC's defense is terrible. So giving up 482 yards is nothing. They ran the ball 47 times, only threw the ball 23 times. So, I mean, there you go. Penalties, Utah had 8 for 50 yards. USC had 6 for 47. Both teams turned the ball over one time each. It was an interception for Utah. It was a fumble for USC. Now, here is what really killed USC in this game. Time of possession. Utah, 34 minutes, 42 seconds. USC, 25 minutes, 18 seconds. Utah was just the better team this game. They showed it. And I think that's the reason why I like watching Utah play, is because they don't care who they're playing. They're going to play hard each and every night. And really, this is why Utah is a team to really watch out for in the Pac-12. Because you got the teams like USC, you got Oregon, you got Washington. But Utah's defending Pac-12 champions, folks. And they're showing you why they're the Pac-12 champions. Because they play team football. They play hard football. And USC was just terribly, terribly overrated. Now, I went back the other day and looked at some of my predictions from May of this year. And I got to tell you that to be honest with you, back in May, we're in the middle of summer. Well, summer hadn't even started yet. We're at the end of the school year last year, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to predict. And see, I had USC winning the Pac-12, had Caleb Williams in the Heisman race, which, I mean, Caleb Williams is probably still there, but not really that high anymore, in my opinion. And So having USC win the Pac-12, I didn't really think it out very clearly. And so I will say this. USC is terribly overrated from what we've seen this season because all of those people trying to tell you, oh, at worst they're a one-loss team and they'll probably make the playoff. That ain't happening. Look, this team is worse than the team they had last year because the teams around them are a whole lot better. So not only do you have Utah to beat you or Tulane, because Utah beat you twice throughout last season, which is pretty embarrassing, to be honest with you. Excuse me. But it's even more embarrassing. You got beat to Tulane. And now you've lost it. You went on the road to Notre Dame. Okay, we'll give you that one because it's Notre Dame. But you get your butts kicked at home to Utah. And that's really what happened, even though it was a 2-point game. Really, it was much wider than that, folks. USC, at best, from what I'm seeing, 8-4. They cannot beat Washington, and they cannot beat Oregon. That is what I have seen so far. Until they play better, I don't believe Oregon and Washington will even leave any chance for USC in their games against them. So, that's just my assessment of Utah and USC. So now we move on to Tennessee and Alabama. Oh, it's a revenge game for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. And first half, it seemed like they were just going to roll over and let Tennessee beat the crap out of them. And really, Tennessee kind of blew it in this one because they were up 20-7 at halftime. And looking at the stats, I mean, it's not like Alabama steamrolled them in the second half. The only thing you can really give Alabama credit is the time of possession. They controlled it. 32-19 was how long Alabama had the football. Tennessee had it for 27 minutes, 41 seconds. Penalties. Now, okay, here's been a big thing for Alabama these last few years has been penalties. Incredibly clean game for their standards. They had one penalty for 5 yards. Now, there have been a lot of things. The refs have been really torched on social media for the way that they called this Alabama-Tennessee game. A lot of Tennessee fans saying that it wasn't fair, that there was a lot of calls that they should have had on Alabama that did not call. Of course, that went unnoticed. And then Alabama fans, there's really one that Alabama fans probably are probably still irritated about. There was a defensive player for Tennessee who decided to take his elbow and just hit, I think it was one of the running backs, maybe Roy Dell Williams or Jason McClellan, whoever it was, just basically whack him in the head with the guy's elbow. So, I mean, that was a big miss for the refs in this game. Alabama, though, if you look at the first downs, Tennessee 22-20 of Alabama. Third down efficiency, Tennessee 8 of 18, Alabama 5 for 13. Tennessee, though, you're 0 for 3 on fourth down. And they kept going to it. I don't understand. Tennessee, of course, outgained Alabama 404 to 358. Tennessee passed for 271 to 220 of Alabama. Run game, Alabama 138, Tennessee 133. So Tennessee had 8 penalties, 55 yards. Tennessee only turned the ball over one time. Alabama turned it over twice. Alabama, they find ways to win games. And it makes no sense. So, yes, Bama, this is a good comment, though. Bama outscored Tennessee 27-0, second half. That is dominant. Yes. Here's the thing I will say about Alabama, though. And that is, maybe this was the half they needed to really right the ship. because you look at it, they haven't played dominant football all season. And they played that second half against Tennessee, shut them out, outscored them 27-0. Now, I think the offense still is just so... It's not good for Alabama standards. Alabama has very high standards. And the offense is just not what Bama fans have come accustomed to. But if they can just find their bread and butter, if they can just find a couple of plays that really work, because I think we figured out Jalen Milroe, he's got the deep ball. He can't really throw it short. If the offensive line can protect their quarterback, and if they can give the running backs time to get something going, then that's the team Alabama's got to have. And so at 7-1, it's promising for what they could go down the stretch and do. I mean, they're definitely the top team in the SEC West right now. So it is going to be interesting as my computer decides to... Oh, that was kind of odd. Either way. I mean, Alabama, it's going to be interesting to see how they do the rest of the season. But hopefully that was the half that Bama fans can really look at and be like, okay, here we go. This is the Bama stretch we're used to. So we will see if that is so. All right, now, it is the point in the show where if you have any questions at all, you can type in the chat and I will answer them. We've got also later tonight, we're going to talk about Penn State, Ohio State. We're going to talk about Virginia, North Carolina. Then I'm going to announce Saturday's game. That will be here on the channel. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat now. This is your opportunity to interact with me here on the show. And also, if you want to comment anything about my new studio set, please. I would love to talk about it because it's quite awesome. So, have any questions, please put them in the chat as I take a sip of water. But of course, very interesting stuff happened this weekend. And really, also next week, not only am I going to be reacting to my rankings, but of course, the college football playoff rankings will be coming out Tuesday on Halloween. So that'll actually be the first topic. We'll probably first go into my rankings, and then I will go into the college football playoff rankings right after that. So here is a good one. Why is Oklahoma not number one? Okay, so that's actually a good question. So he added in, do you not believe in them? Okay, here's the thing with Oklahoma. They barely beat UCF. They had to stop a 2-point conversion just to beat UCF at home. Now, of course, Gus Malzahn, he's a good coach. I'll give him that because at Auburn, even though some of his teams were like 8-5, people are hating on him. It is impressive, though, because not many teams did what he did against Alabama, and that is beat Alabama, I believe it was like 3 times, and against Saban. And when I think it's when Auburn comes in with like a really good season, and Alabama's got to play Auburn. I think Auburn's beat them most of the time, if that's correct. So I will give Gus credit because I think he did do a good job with Auburn. Auburn fans are just hard to please. But Oklahoma, I just feel like they have a little bit more to have to improve on. Now, I think they are the second best team in college football. Ohio State, on the other hand, played great defense against Penn State, and they really looked like a dominant team against Penn State. So that's the whole, I think Ohio State, they got 2 big wins this season. They've looked really good in those wins. And quite frankly, I think Oklahoma, they've had the 1 win against Texas, and then, of course, they've struggled a little bit. So I think the edge goes to Ohio State, but, of course, things are going to change. It's not like this is going to stay the same forever. So Oklahoma could find their way back at number 1 next week or at some point. So that is my reasoning for Oklahoma. All right. Of course, I'm still open to any more comments. I'll give you all another minute or two if you want to put any more comments in the chat for me to answer. I am happy to answer your questions. So if you want to, go ahead and put that in the chat. All right. Well, since there's no questions, we're just going to go ahead and move on. So, Penn State, Ohio State. What was, for the most part, defensive slugfest in this one, for the most part. And so, we look at this game, and first downs, Ohio State 22, Penn State 15. Now, here's the one that really gets me. Ohio State was 6 of 16 on third down. Penn State, 1 of 16. Now, I think you got to give the credit to Ohio State's defense. And, I mean, clearly Drew Aller, he did not play good. He did not play good whatsoever. But I think it was mainly that Ohio State defense. That's a defense to really be worried about for any team having to play Ohio State. Okay, fourth down efficiency, Penn State 1 of 3, Ohio State 0 of 1. Total yards, Ohio State 365, Penn State 240. Yards per pass. Now, this is the big kicker here. Ohio State 8.2. Penn State, 4.5. There was nothing going very far down the field if you're Penn State. Run game, Penn State only 49 yards. You've got 2 great running backs, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, couldn't do nothing in this game. Ohio State, 79. Not a lot of run game for them either. So, either way, penalties. Ohio State did have more, 6 for 54. Penn State, 5 for 32. Turnovers, Ohio State had a fumble. Possession, again, Ohio State, 34 minutes, 24 seconds. Penn State, 25 minutes, 36 seconds. Ohio State dominated pretty much every facet of the game. And it's that third downs, and then just the way that Aller wasn't throwing deep at all. He was throwing short passes. And it was just not a good game if you are, if you're Penn State, this was bad. This was really bad. And we'll see how Penn State does. But Penn State, since they won the Big Ten championship years ago, they just can't do nothing. They can't win the big game. So here's the big question that really comes with this. And that is, what is the security of James Franklin? Because, yes, they're 6-1. Yes, they've been there every year. But they haven't won the big game. So just like how at the beginning of the season, we were wondering about Ryan Day. Like, is he on the hot seat because he can't win the big game? What about James Franklin? Is James Franklin on the hot seat? I mean, if someone has a comment on this, you can go ahead and put your opinion in the chat. I would love to talk about this. But, I mean, that is a big question because what has he done at Penn State that's really said, okay, Penn State, we're happy with this? Now, the only thing I will say is that the Big Ten is very academic. And, I mean, it's all good to be all in on academics. But also at the same time, if you're talking about football, and if your team literally is going nowhere, you are not putting your team in a position to win a championship, and that's ultimately what you're looking for. Can you get to that place to win a championship? James Franklin, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it for Penn State? Penn State has been able to recruit the talent. Can they make that run? I don't think so. I don't think Penn State is good enough to make the playoff. So, right now, I've got them at 11, but quite frankly, there's not a lot of hope I have for Penn State right now. They're a good team. They'll probably end up winning whatever bowl game they go to, but they're not making the playoff. They're not making the Big Ten championship game. They're not good enough. People are saying this could be the year for Penn State. No, this is not the year because you got to go to play Michigan. Now, the only way – here's the thing. If the scandal stuff for Michigan gets really bad and they have to start suspending players, which I don't think that's going to happen because, I mean, players don't have anything to do with it. Either way, if the players are affected by anything, Penn State's got a chance. But I think Michigan handles Penn State easily. So that's the one thing I want you to think about Penn State is what's the security of James Franklin after this? And then finally we will wrap it up and with our last game to talk about, Virginia and North Carolina. And folks, just like Penn State, let me rephrase that. North Carolina and Penn State are different in the way that they lose. Penn State just can't win the big game. North Carolina loses to teams they shouldn't lose to. If that ever was evident, this is the moment right here where we look at this and we're like, how in the world did they lose this one? Okay, let me explain. They lost 31-27 to Virginia. A 1-5 Virginia football team. You're at home to make things worse. So, first downs. Both teams had 26 first downs. Third down efficiency. Virginia, 8 of 18. North Carolina, 4 of 13. Fourth down efficiency. Virginia, 2 of 3. North Carolina, 0 of 2. Total yards. North Carolina, 490. Virginia, 436. Passing yards. North Carolina, 347. Virginia, 208. Run game. Virginia, 228 to 143. Penalties. North Carolina, 6 for 58. Virginia, 6 for 40. Virginia turned the ball over 2 times to 1 of North Carolina. But when you have games where really bad teams beat really good teams, what's the time of possession? How did the teams do with the time of possession? Virginia, 37 minutes, 6 seconds. North Carolina, 22 minutes, 54 seconds. Clearly, if you have the ball 37 minutes, clearly you should win the game. Now, they won by 4 points, Virginia did. Virginia's not a good football team. The fact that they just went to North Carolina and beat North Carolina. And Virginia, we were talking about them getting upset early in the season. I mean, what is going on? North Carolina surely is in the race to go to the ACC championship game. But this really hurts if you're North Carolina. Some teams, and I mean, I'm looking at Alabama, where I could say when you lose to a good team, it's not going to hurt you. North Carolina does not lose to good teams. Well, I mean, they do sometimes, most of the time. But here is the big thing. They lose to crappy teams. This is crappy, losing to Virginia at home. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say about this, but North Carolina, I mean, maybe still has a chance. I don't know. It's very slim, though. It's very, very slim. So, all right. So, now, that is the games I was reacting to. Also, I've got some more questions here. Basically, why do I still have Tulane in my top 25? Well, I still think they're the top team in the group of 5. And so I still think they're a pretty good team. I think they're not going to beat a lot of teams, but I mean, I feel like they can compete really well. So, and then why not Florida State at number 1? I just don't trust them at number 1, at least. I think they're a really good team. I'm going to stick with 5. I think that's a good spot for them until something else happens. All right. So now it is time for me to announce this week's game. And this one is one that people may be thinking, okay, this is not exactly a, really big game per se, but I think it's an interesting game. And it's always interesting, to be honest with you. Clemson, NC State game's going to be at 1 o'clock Central Time. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be Saturday. So, of course, you start your Saturday with college football, SBN College Football Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. That'll go to 11. And then, of course, 2 hours later, Clemson, NC State right here on Saber Broadcast Network. It's going to be awesome. Of course, Clemson's going to be coming off that loss to Miami. What can Clemson do? What is wrong with Clemson? If they lose to NC State, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to think about Clemson. Maybe Dabo should start looking at the transfer portal and maybe start looking at it as if, we could probably win if we go to the transfer portal. Or it could be either that or just these last few years have just been throwaway years for Clemson. Or is it that maybe it's time for Dabo to look at it and be like, maybe I'm not the right fit for Clemson anymore? Which I could never see a world where he wasn't the fit. So, I mean, I don't know. Weird things going on in Clemson.
And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to College Football Wraparound. I'm Cooper Naylor. So glad that you could join us. So as you can see, it is Saturday, It's college football Saturday, to be exact. And what a day. Okay. So, of course, today, Clemson NC State's the game that will be here on the network. So, what are we talking about here in the pregame show? We're going to preview Clemson NC State. We're going to preview Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Florida, Duke, Louisville, Oregon, Utah, and then we're going to pick the games. So, it is going to be a great day of football. So, thanks for choosing us to begin your day of college football. So, let's start out with Clemson and NC State. So, this game's going to be at 1 o'clock. I'm covering it. And, it's weird to see a Clemson team being 4-3. And I guess the big question is, because we didn't want to admit this, but maybe, just maybe, the Clemson dynasty is coming to an end. We're gonna explore. We're gonna explore this and see, is it really over? Because it's interesting because Clemson, 2010s, when you think of college football, you can't overlook the dominance Clemson had. I mean, they won 2 championships with Dabo Swinney, and quite honestly, you had some great quarterbacks come through, and maybe that's part of it, is that the quarterback situation just hasn't been there and not been that good for Clemson the last few years. So, what is the problem with Clemson? Well, first of all, like I sort of mentioned just a second ago, quarterback. And it's not that Cade Klubnik's a bad quarterback, because I think he's a decent quarterback. But for Clemson and where they want to go, I don't think he's got what it takes to be a winning quarterback. So we look at his stats for the season. He's 155 for 244 throwing the football. That's a 63.5% completion percentage. He's thrown for 1,684 yards, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So, I mean, the thing that I see from this is that I don't know. I mean, it seems very pedestrian, because I think when you look at Clemson, their big thing is they need a good quarterback. Other teams don't have to have that, but I feel like he's just an average quarterback and not really for where Clemson wants to go. I don't think he's really the guy. So, if you look at the run game, also, that's been just really kind of non-existent for Clemson this season. Your leading rusher is Will Shipley, 106 attempts, 494 yards, 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, it's not really been there. Your next leading rusher is Phil Maffa, 7 carries, 57 carries, 355 yards, 4 touchdowns. Klubnik himself has carried the ball 70 times for 93 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, Klubnik does bring like a dual threat kind of play with, the ability to run, and then, he can throw it decently, but it's not incredible. And I think that's the big problem, is that, I think the big thing is the run game's got to be better, and quarterback play is just not to the level what it needs to be. And that's led them to a 4-3 season so far. Receiving wise, your leading receiver is Brown. I think it's Tyler Brown. 28 receptions, 389 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, I will say, as far as receptions are concerned, it's very you know, there's not just one guy, it's a lot of different guys that are, being a part of the, a part of the passing game there for Clemson. So, what do I see happening in this game today? I see a Clemson team that I think this is going to be a close game. I don't know if there's ever this season going to be a game where Clemson really gets way out ahead of somebody and wins, unless it's like, Furman like they did earlier this season. I don't know. There's a lot that I would say I don't really trust about Clemson this season. And really, it's going to be interesting, this game. I think when it's all said and done, I do think that this is a game that you're going to see, to me, I think this is like a 28-24 type game. Not very high scoring. Just, not. It'll be a good game. I'll say that. But we will, of course, see how the teams do. And let me see right here quick. I'm going to pull up some stats for NC State as well so that you can get an idea of where they're going. Now, believe, if I'm correct, they may be switching quarterbacks. Don't quote me on that one. I'm not 100% sure. So far in the season, quarterback-wise, you've basically had two quarterbacks that's played. Brandon Armstrong is 94 of 160, so that's 58.8% throwing the football. 971 yards, 5 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And then Morris, who is right behind him, 41 of 72, which is a 56.9% completion percentage, 458 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So for NC State, interceptions are a big thing here. Then you look at the run game. Brennan Armstrong, leading rusher, 70 carries, 281 yards, 3 touchdowns. Allen, 43 carries, 230 yards, a touchdown. Mims, the third, 51 carries, 171 yards, 6 touchdowns. And then there's a big drop-off in the run game. That's like the 3 big rushers for the team. So I think really NC State's got to be able to run the ball effectively against Clemson. I think it can happen. It's going to be interesting for sure. But what I'm going to be watching is the NC State run game against that defense of Clemson. I think that's the big story here. How does that go? So we'll see what happens in today's game. But let's turn our attention to Oklahoma, Kansas coming up here in just a few minutes. What's going to be a really interesting game this season. And I've got Oklahoma in my top 2. So I think they're a good team. Dylan Gabriel, of course, their quarterback, 166 of 233, 71% completion percentage, folks. He's thrown for over 2,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions on the season. He's had a good season so far, I think. Run game, very balanced. Marcus Major, 78 carries, 308 yards, touchdown. Walker, 53 carries, 239 yards, 4 touchdowns. Gabriel, 53 carries, 230 yards, 5 touchdowns. Barnes, 28 carries, 122 yards, a touchdown. Really, Oklahoma is a very they have multiple ways that they can beat you, whether it be the pass game, whether it be the run game. it's going, and I mean, I think that this is having that type of offense where you can do both. I mean, it's an advantage because then you can play against, you can basically play against any defense and run, whatever play, and you're going to, have an effective game when it comes to how it's played. So I'll say this. I think it's going to be an interesting game. And I'm going to real quickly get some stats for Kansas pulled up for you. But again, I think offensively, Oklahoma, they're two-dimensional. It's going to be incredible to see how they do. Jalen Daniels, I believe, has been hurt. So it's Jason Bean, who is the quarterback for Kansas. This season, he's 62 and 95 throwing the football. That's 65% throwing the ball. 913 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions for him. Run game, and I think they're a big run team. Neal, their running back, 90 carries, 659 yards, 6 touchdowns. Highshaw Jr., 68 carries, 437 yards, 6 touchdowns. McDuffie, 33 carries, 180 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I think the big thing is, I think for Kansas, they got to be able to effectively run the ball against an Oklahoma defense that's really started playing pretty good defense this season compared to where they were last year. And I think it's a lot of credit to their head coach Brent Venables. It's going to be interesting about this game coming up in just a few minutes. Well, actually, at 11 a.m. I think it's going to come down to how does the run game of Kansas go against the defense of Oklahoma? I think that's the big storyline here. And then Oklahoma, how do you effectively run the ball, pass the ball, and still have some incredible ways to win the game? So, I'll pick this game here in a little bit. It's going to be interesting between Oklahoma and Kansas. That's coming up here in just a little while. So it'll be very interesting. And folks, got to ask y'all, do y'all hate it when you got your phone in your hand, you're trying to do a show, and then you got this spam call? I got to tell you, especially when it's the same number that keeps calling you over and over, and it's like, I haven't answered because I don't want to answer. Yeah, very annoying, but of course, I'll make it through. Also, well, I'm going to give you some updates on some injuries here in just a minute. If I can figure out what my phone's doing. Okay. So, first of all, we're gonna get an update on Brock Bowers. And of course, I believe they're coming right out of a bye week for Georgia. So, and I mean, he had the injury 2 weeks ago. Believe he had surgery on his ankle, I think it was. But let's see. So Brock Bowers had tightrope surgery, which is if I believe correctly, basically the ankle, it just, it's more of a support surgery. And I don't he's not playing today, I don't think. Um, I, I think it said a while back it was going to be like 4 to 6 weeks whenever. So I mean, if it's on the quick side and it's 4 weeks, then he's halfway there. But it is going to be interesting because how is Georgia's offense going to adapt without him? And quite frankly, I think they're fine. Um, um, if you look at it, Carson Beck, 173 of 235 this season. That's 73% throwing the football. 2,000 over 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season for Carson Beck. I think he's had a great season. It's just his first year as a starter, so very interesting season. The run game. I mean, you got one rusher, Dejon Edwards, 80 carries, 460 yards, 6 touchdowns. Other than him, the run game's kind of not been as effective this season. And really, the run game's not the key for this Georgia football team. Of course, it's going to be big without Brock Bowers. On the season, he's got 41 receptions, 566 yards, 4 touchdowns. The next leading receiver, which I think will be, which Carson Beck's going to rely heavily on, is Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. He's got 18 receptions, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lovett, 31 receptions, 282 yards, a touchdown. Thomas, 16 receptions, 256 yards, a touchdown. Delp. Now, Oscar Delp is actually the guy who I think is going to be replacing Brock Bowers at tight end. He's got 13 receptions, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. So I do expect that the passing game, as far as the passing game to the tight end, will still be there, but it's not as. I feel like it's going to be used a little less than what the a little bit less than what it is when you have Brock Bowers. That's just my opinion. So, I think for Georgia, it will be interesting how they, passing game, I think, is going to be the big thing here. Now, Florida is the one that, I think it's going to be interesting because I don't know if Florida's really been. Florida really hasn't shown up, in my opinion, on the road yet. They're 5-2 on the season. Of course, their 2 road losses are Utah, season opener, and then of course Kentucky, where they just got. Really, the score was a lot worse than what what you actually see in the final result. So Graham Mertz is your quarterback, 170 to 223. He's 76% on the season, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Leading rusher is Johnson. He's got 85 carries, 438 yards, 4 touchdowns. ETN, 69 carries, 407 yards, 3 touchdowns. Webb's got 22 carries for 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, and then also your receiving game, Pearsall, 44 receptions, 619 yards, 3 touchdowns. Wilson, the third, 26 receptions, 251 yards, a touchdown. Boardingham, the tight end, 18 receptions, 205 yards, 4 touchdowns, and the list goes on for Florida. The big thing here is, I think Florida's got to take a page of what Auburn did successfully against Georgia. That is, you got to run the ball. If you can't run the ball against Georgia, I don't think you have much of a chance. But if they can run the ball effectively against Georgia, I think Florida is going to make this very interesting today. I would not say I mean, as far as these last few years, this is not the most impressive Georgia team we've seen. Now I was reminded about something that my that one of my analysts reminded me about is that Georgia is now, if you look at them, they're playing a lot like how Alabama, when they were dominant, how when people started thinking, oh, Alabama's not that good, they'd come back in one of these games and just play a absolutely incredible football game, and then everybody be like, okay, they're for real. Um, I think if you're Georgia, if you want to kind of silence some people that may be saying you're not good, this is a game where Georgia's got to really just come out and just obliterate Florida. Even though Florida, I mean, I don't think is. I mean, I think they're a top. I put them in the top 25 this week, but I don't know if they have much of a chance against Georgia. But I will say, I think it's going to be a close game, and it'll be interesting for sure to see how this game goes, because I think you look at Georgia, you look at Florida, and there's just, I think Georgia's just a really good team, and we'll see what happens today in this game. But, again, run game for Florida, very big against Georgia, because Georgia's defense against the run, especially against Auburn, did not play great. So let's see, can Florida take advantage of that, or is Georgia going to have a good day against Florida? We will see for sure, because it's going to be I think it'll be a good game. It's at 2:30 today over on CBS. So it'll be, once we end today, it'll probably be about halftime for Georgia and Florida. So, very interesting game. And then we look at Duke and Louisville. So you look at Duke, and the big question here, and I'm going to look this up real quick, is the health of Riley Leonard. Now, I think the big thing here, okay, so there is optimism coming from sources that Leonard will play today against Louisville. So it looks like it's more or less a game time decision for Leonard. And I mean, I think that's the big thing. If he plays and if he's healthy enough to really play a good game today for Duke, then I think Duke's got a chance. This season, though, Leonard, and it's been a little bit more of a rougher season for him, but he's 86 of 142. He's got a 60% completion percentage, 981 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Of course, he's been hurt. The run game, Waters, 78 carries, 465 yards, 9 touchdowns. Moore, 69 carries, 390 yards, 3 touchdowns. Leonard, 48 carries, 339 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then it kind of goes down from there. So, very interesting for sure. For Duke. And then passing game, you've got Calhoun, your leading receiver, 25 receptions, 379 yards, 2 touchdowns. Moore, 27 receptions, 348 yards, 3 touchdowns. Hagan, 17 receptions, 144 yards. And then, it kind of drops off from there. So, also with quarterbacks, Balin, the 4th, I believe, or 5th, or whatever it is, he is 13 and 26 this season, which is 50%. 232 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Here's the big thing for Duke is that I think they've got to really, I think they've got to be able to effectively run the ball in this game. I think the passing game is not really. I don't know if you trust the passing game. So it's going to be interesting. But I don't know. Duke, there's just a lot of question marks because if Riley Leonard plays, I feel like the team will play a lot better. But because he may not, then, and I mean, I'm going to look at Louisville real quick also because Louisville, I think, has an advantage, especially because they're at home. This game's like at 2:30 on ESPN, but Jack Plummer is 132 of 208. That's 63%. He's thrown for over almost 2,000 yards now, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then you look at the run game. Jordan's their leading rusher, 89 carries, 661 yards, 8 touchdowns. Garindo is their second leading rusher, 52 carries, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. Turner, 31 carries, 159 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Brown, 11 carries, 65 yards, a touchdown. And then it kind of drops off from there. So, I think Louisville, they're very well, all-around team. I think the big thing here is I really think Louisville's got the advantage here. Louisville's got to use that advantage and play a good football game. And if they do, I don't know how close this could be for Duke because Duke's going to have a hard time, I think. If they, it's going to be hard for Duke just because it's just not, with their quarterback being hurt some, it's just not been good. So, of course, we will see what happens later today. So, let us go to commercial break, and then we'll preview Oregon, Utah, and then it'll be time for game picks. So, we will be right back. And welcome back, everybody, to College Football Wraparound. Coming back from commercial break. And so we're going to talk about Oregon and Utah. And then, of course, it will be time for some game picks. And we start out talking about Oregon. And one of the, this is incredible. So Bo Nix, of course, is a Heisman candidate. This season, 182 of 232 throwing the ball. That's nearly 80% throwing the football. Over 2,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, 1 interception, folks. That's an incredible season if you're Bo Nix to this point. Leading rusher is Irving, 87 carries, 649 yards, 7 touchdowns. James, 58 carries, 463 yards, 8 touchdowns. Whittington, 20 carries, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. Bo Nix, 28 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, and it kind of drops off from there. And you look at the passing game. Leading receiver is Franklin, 44 receptions, 768 yards, 8 touchdowns. Johnson, 28 receptions, 68 yards, 4 touchdowns. Bryant Jr., 19 receptions, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ferguson, 23 receptions, 232 yards, 1 touchdown. Irving, 27 receptions, 222 yards, 1 touchdown. Holden, 20 receptions, 212 yards, 3 touchdowns, and it drops off from there. So, of course, very balanced team. Oregon, I think, is going to be a really tough team to beat. But if there's a team that can do it, it's going to be that Utah football team. And I'm going to get them some stats, and then I'm going to talk about what I think needs to happen in this game. So, you look at Utah. Now, the big thing is Brant Keithy and Cam Rising ruled out for the season by Whittingham. And so, Bryson Barnes is your starting quarterback. He is 52 of 89. That's 58% throwing the ball. 633 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Your run game, Jackson, 87 carries, 450 yards, 1 touchdown. Glover, 71 carries, 256 yards, 2 touchdowns. Vaki, 25 carries, 232 yards, 2 touchdowns. Johnson, the backup quarterback for the season at least, 56 carries, 153 yards, 3 touchdowns. Bryson Barnes, 33 carries, 124 yards, 3 touchdowns. So, very run-heavy team, especially from what I saw last week. As far as leading receiver, Matthews, 22 receptions, 210 yards, no touchdowns. Parks, 15 receptions, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns. Bailey, 15 receptions, 201 yards. Vaki, 6 receptions, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, kind of drops off from there. But here's the thing. Oregon's defense is going to have to show up against that run game of Utah to have a chance to win this game. I think, honestly, Utah playing at home, they've got an advantage in this one. And I think that the big thing is Utah, they've got to run the ball effectively, but they've also, I think, got to hit the pass plays at the right moments in the game. And for Oregon, you just got to have Bo Nix have another incredible game today. As long as he can do that, and as long as your defense can kind of hold Utah, I think this one, Oregon would have the advantage there. So, very interesting game. We're going to see what happens in this one. Of course, there's a lot that could happen. So, we're going to see. But very interesting game today in Salt Lake City between the Ducks and the Utes. All right, so it is time for some game picks. I'm all alone for this again this week. So my analyst may be back later. So there is the game picks records. I'm 40-22. Jack still remains at 41-15. Colton 23-18. Jack, of course, you look at it, he's doing really well this season. So our game picks, I'm going to do Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Florida, Duke, Louisville, Oregon, Utah. Because the only other one that I had listed was Clemson, NC State. But, of course, since we're doing the game, we're not going to be picking that. So we're going to start out with Oklahoma and Kansas. Very interesting one. How does this Oklahoma offense play against this defense of Kansas, which I think Oklahoma would have the advantage there? Then the big storyline is, how does the offense of Kansas do against that defense of Oklahoma? That's the big story in this game. It's coming up here in a few minutes. It's going to be interesting, but I got to take Oklahoma. Oklahoma, I think, is the better team here because they've played really good football throughout the season. So give me Oklahoma. Our second game, Georgia and Florida, 2:30 today. I think this game, I think Georgia wins it, and it's because I think they are going to be the better team in this game. I'm going to say that this would be more of a 34-31 type game just because I don't know if Georgia has the ability to blow Florida out. I think it'd be interesting. That's for sure. Of course, I may be wrong and they may beat the crap out of Florida today. But right now, I think I'm going Georgia 34-31. Either way, if Georgia wins, then and it doesn't matter how they win, I still would pick them right. Duke and Louisville. Here is the big thing with that. It depends on Riley Leonard, but I'm going to go Louisville. I just don't expect Riley Leonard, even if he plays, to really be at the top of his game. So I've got to go with Louisville. Louisville's playing at home. Louisville's had a good season. And so I'm going to go Louisville in this one. I think they're just the better team. And then finally we end with Oregon and Utah, also at 2:30, just like the previous two games we've talked about. I'll be honest. The way that I watched Utah play against USC and the way Oregon has played this season, I mean, I'll be honest. I think I'm going to go Utah on this one. I just think until someone proves it to me, I think they'll be back in the Pac-12 championship. Just looking back at it this past week, really, assessing things, Utah's I think they're the best team in the Pac-12. So give me Utah, and we will see how I do this week. It's going to be very interesting. So, of course, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. Of course, you want to tune in again today at 1 o'clock. That is when we are going to be having Clemson and NC State. Very interesting game coming up a little bit later today. But for now, thanks for watching. I'm Cooper Naylor, and we will see you again later today.